And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Friday, March 21st. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we are going to start off the show. We're going to recap the games from yesterday, day one of March Madness. We'll take a look at the matchups for day two. And we'll take a look at some of the matchups also for this weekend, because some of them, I believe, have been finalized as well. I'll talk about how my bracket looks currently. One of them actually is doing really well. There's one that's not doing so well, but we'll get into that. We'll talk about, in the second part of the show, the Dodgers being essentially the next villain in baseball and why that's beneficial for the sport of baseball. We'll talk about Najee Harris, his recent comments on leaving the Steelers. He joined the Chargers this offseason. I wanted to talk about his comments on the Steelers. And we'll get into the 5-year anniversary of Tom Brady signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and just the impact that move had on the NFL. And then in the final part of the show, I'll continue my season overviews. Today we will be covering the Buffalo Bills. So let's get into the first topic, which is discussing yesterday's games. And, there were some good games. I think the one surprising upset was McNeese over Clemson. Now, I actually had Clemson going to the Sweet 16. So that, of course, ended up costing me in my brackets. But that was an interesting game, to say the least, because you had Clemson was awful in the first half. Awful in the first half. They put up 13 points in the first half. And I was looking at when I was looking at the articles on the recaps of the game, I'm trying to see, because I took a screenshot of it because I wanted to read the stat. So, yeah, 13 points in the first half, and I wanted to see. I took a bunch of screenshots because I wanted to read, because it was comparing that first half to some of the other low-scoring first halves. And, so first of all, credit to McNeese, because that was their first ever NCAA tournament victory. And they made the tournament last year. They ended up getting knocked out. Will Wade, the coach, said that, they took it like it was a field trip last year instead of, being more focused. So, here they played really well in the game. Now, things got a little dicey at the end because Clemson had a late comeback, but they were still able to get the win. Clemson's, here it is. So Clemson's 13 points at halftime nearly set a record in the shot clock era. The fewest points in the first half of a tournament game is 10 by Wake Forest against Butler in 2001 and by Kent State against UNLV in 2008. Yeah, it was a very ugly first half for the Tigers. And you look at what happens in the second half for them. I think they put up 54 points in the second half. They outscored McNeese in the second half. I think it was 54 to 38. I mean, and they came that close. They ended up losing by 2. If the game went a little bit longer, they, probably come back and win that game. But you could tell, like, McNeese was getting to the basket. They were having their way in the paint in this game. Looking at the stats, both teams really didn't shoot the ball well. McNeese shot the ball 43.5% to Clemson's 36.8%. So that's not great. 3-pointers, I mean, yikes. I mean, McNeese was 4 of 19. Clemson was 9 of 30. Free throws, McNeese wasn't very good. They were 50%. Clemson was 84%. McNeese out-rebound them. Turnovers, also played a big role. McNeese got 19 points off turnovers. But, it's just they did not show up in the first half. And had they played a decent first half, they win this game. But it was just too little, too late. But congratulations to McNeese on moving on. That was definitely the biggest upset of the day. And taking a look at some of the other games, so Creighton and Louisville got us started off. Creighton basically had control of that game the whole way against Louisville. Had a very good game, career high in points out of one of their guards. Neal, he had 29 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists. Shot the ball very well, 11 to 16. Kolkbrenner had 14 points, and Ashworth had 22 as well. But yeah, they pretty much had control. I mean, Louisville was kind of getting themselves back in the game, but this game never really got very close at the end. Creighton, like I said, had control of the game for the most part. Looking at the 1 seed, so we did have a couple of 1 seeds play yesterday. Houston, they won 78-40 in their matchup. Auburn, they beat Alabama State 83-63. In the beginning, it was looking a little dicey. You also had Amar Knox. He was kind of trash talking with the Auburn bench early on. But Auburn, they took control of that game. Their top scorer in the game was Miles Kelly with 23 points. So they move on. They'll be playing Creighton, and a lot of people have Creighton upsetting Auburn, and I am one of those people. So I'm probably going to end up being wrong. Purdue won their matchup 75-63. That game was close for a little bit. Wisconsin won 85-66 over Montana. Gonzaga, I mean, they were up. They took a massive lead early on. They were up 13-0 before Georgia's first basket. It got to as much as 27-3. And then at the half, it ended up being 48-27. They ended up winning 89-68. BYU won their matchup against VCU 80-71. That was, I think, another one where a lot of people had VCU upsetting BYU. Arkansas Kansas was a very good game. That was very entertaining. Towards the end of the game, they're trying to inbound the ball, and they had to waste 2 of their timeouts at the end. And Calipari was really upset with that, how that was handled. But that was a very close game. That came down to the end. But John Calipari, he moves on, and it's going to be him against Rick Pitino. Arkansas against St. Johns. So I'm looking forward to that game. Tennessee won their matchup as well, 77-62. Texas A&M, a lot of people were picking Yale to upset them. I was one of those people. Texas A&M ended up winning 80-71. Drake won against Mizzou 67-57. An 11 seed upsets a 6 seed. I mean, they had 30 wins coming into the game, and they finished in first place in their conference. But yeah, they ended up winning. UCLA all over Utah State 72-47. St. John's winning 83-53. Like I said, they'll be playing Arkansas. Actually, another very close game. You had UC San Diego against Michigan. That came down to the last shot. I mean, they almost tied the game at the end. Actually, UC San Diego took the lead late at one point, but Michigan was able to come back and hold on. Because it was a tale of 2 different halves. Because Michigan outscored UC San Diego 41-27, and then UC San Diego outscored Michigan 38-27. Because I believe they did take the lead. Yeah, they took the lead late. It was 65-63, but then Michigan scored the final 5 points of the game, and they won by 3. And then Texas Tech winning 82-72. So they move on as well. So for today's matchups, now let me see. Is there any matchups that got finalized for Saturday? Actually, yeah. So we do have plenty. So McNeese is going to be playing Purdue. St. Johns is going to be playing Arkansas. I'm looking forward to that. Michigan against Texas A&M. Drake against Texas Tech. Creighton against Auburn. BYU against Wisconsin. Houston against Gonzaga. And then Tennessee against UCLA. So that's what we got so far. And then for today's games, so starting at 12:15 Eastern Time, you got Baylor against Mississippi State. Alabama will be playing against Robert Morris. So I have Alabama and Mississippi State winning both of those games. Iowa State against Lipscomb. I got Iowa State winning. Duke is playing Mount St. Mary's. Got Duke winning. Memphis and Colorado State's interesting. Memphis is actually an underdog in this game. I did have Memphis winning. I picked St. Mary's against Vanderbilt. I do have UNC winning over Ole Miss. I actually have UNC going to my Sweet 16. So, we'll see what happens there. I think I have Grand Canyon upsetting Maryland. I had them advancing a couple rounds last year as well. They actually did win their first game last year. I got Florida winning, Kentucky winning. I do have the Lobos knocking off Marquette. I had Marquette in my Final Four last year. I think I have Arizona over Akron. UConn I have winning. Michigan State I have in my Final Four. I think I have Oregon winning, and then I have. I'm not sure. I have to double check. Do I have Xavier knocking off the Illini? I think I do. But I've done a few brackets, so one of them I have it one way. Just want to double check here. So I think. So looking at that matchup, oh no, I do have the Illini knocking off Xavier. So we'll see what happens there. But some entertaining games yesterday. Let's see what today brings us. Let me know what you guys think about the games from yesterday. What about the games today? Do you have any upsets? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Dodgers being the next villain in baseball, or the new villain in baseball, and why that's great for the sport. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the second part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Dodgers and them being the next villain, the new villain of baseball, and why that's good for the sport. So it's good for the sport because you need to have, well, first of all, you need to have that in the sport. And, they're looked at now as the new evil empire, which, you go back to the 90s, that's what the Yankees were, but it's now this team, because this team has an opportunity to not just win one World Series, but multiple. And they definitely have a great chance of repeating this year. And it's just also because of what they've done, how the financial flexibility, what they've been able to do with the contracts that they've given out to allow them to build up this team and make it the way it is. Because a lot of fans are not happy about that. And owners of other teams are not happy about it. But what they're doing is completely legal. Something that I really haven't seen, to this magnitude. I mean, especially with the Ohtani contract. But this is good for the sport. You need that. And the Dodgers are going to be on TV plenty of times. On national TV. I'm saying. They have a lot of nationally televised games, and as they should. And you're going to have a lot of fans hate watching. You will definitely have that. You are going to have fans that are going to be rooting passionately against the Dodgers to lose because they do not want to see this team get back to the World Series and win it again. And last year, they won the World Series despite not having a fully healthy team, a fully healthy pitching staff. And, you also had Ohtani get hurt in the World Series. Freddie Freeman was hurt prior to the World Series, but then, of course, we get to the World Series and he, goes off. He homers in the first 4 games. The first 4 games. So, now the Dodgers are healthy. Now, they're healthy now, but, we get to the playoffs, and if they make a deep playoff run, who knows? I mean, they could be dealing with a ton of injuries, but they have a lot of depth on this team, especially with their pitching. And the way the game is right now with pitchers getting hurt, you need to have as much pitching depth as possible. And they have that. They have really stockpiled up their pitching staff so they can withstand injuries. And you know what? They have the ability to go out and acquire players if players go down on their team. They have the ability to do that. They have a loaded farm system on top of that. So, look, am I happy with what this team has done? Not necessarily. But they're allowed to do this, and it's, the teams that we root for, it's their jobs to go out there and try to knock them off. And can it happen? Sure it can. Anything can happen. Anything can happen in a short series. Anything can happen in a 7-game series. The Padres had the Dodgers on the ropes last year. They could have knocked them off. The Mets gave them a hard time. Yankees beat themselves in the World Series. And all those games were relatively close. So it's not, it's not impossible. I mean, now we'll see how it is with, Ohtani pitching and Sasaki and Glasnow and Snell, now being in the rotation. But, the Dodgers, every team is beatable. Like this, the Dodgers are not going to go 162-0. But I think baseball is at its best when you have a team like this to root against. You go back to the Astros and the sign stealing scandal with the trash cans. Now, I think that got ruined because of the pandemic. Because everything came out, right before the 2020 season. And, you were going to have a heck of a season with that because you're going to have, fans coming to the games, packing up these stadiums and booing the Astros like crazy. And you got that a little bit in the spring training of that season. But then, of course, everything shut down and they came back and there was no fans. So fans didn't have the opportunity. The only chance they really got at booing them was booing them through the TV. So then the following season, there was a little bit of that. I mean, as a Yankee fan, there was a lot of that because, that's what Yankee fans do. And sometimes, as a fan base, they need to learn. I'm not one of those fans. But they need to learn to maybe stop doing that because that only just adds more fuel to the fire. But yeah, that was a missed opportunity. I'm not saying like the Dodgers are going to be getting booed at and fans are going to be throwing stuff at them, but it's people are going to want to come and watch the Dodgers if they're visiting their team, and like if they're on TV, like I said, hate watching is going to become a thing with this team. I mean, it already has been, but now it's only going to be that even more. So it's just you need that for this sport. This sport needs that. And I don't know what's going to happen after 2026. There could be a work stoppage. And that could really, I shouldn't say there could be, but there is going to be. And I don't know how badly that is going to impact the sport as a whole. Will the sport be able to come back from that? I mean, we were having these same conversations, a couple years ago, but they ended up starting on time. So maybe that's the same case here. Because I remember when that was going on, there was a lot of negativity. It was, they're not going to play games. They're going to miss a large chunk of the season. The games are going to be missed. They ended up missing no games. Now, what ended up happening was the first week of the season ended up getting tacked on later on that year in 2022. But there's going to be things that are going to be discussed that I don't believe really were discussed when they were trying to negotiate the last CBA. And that's mainly adding a salary cap to the sport. Because you see these salaries going up and up. And, you look at the contracts Ohtani got, and now you see what Juan Soto got. It's getting too much. Well, it has been getting too much. So, if they miss a significant amount of time following the 2026 season, how is baseball going to be able to bounce back from that? So that's why you got to take advantage of these next couple of years between now and next year, because who knows what happens after that. But look, I'm going to give the Dodgers the respect they deserve. They're a very good team, and if they're on TV, I mean, you got to watch it. You got to watch them play. They're a fun team to watch because they have all these great players. They got Ohtani and Freeman and Mookie Betts, and two of the three players I just mentioned didn't even play in the Tokyo series. But the pitching is what I'm looking forward to watch too. Like when Ohtani takes the mound for the first time, that a lot of people are going to be locked in to see that. And when Sasaki pitches and when Yamamoto pitches. And I saw a headline that said there's even more Japanese players that the Dodgers are interested in signing. And they probably will end up getting them. Like I've said on previous shows, the one thing that really annoys me, it's not even just the money thing. It's just the fact that these free agents kind of toy with these other teams just to go sign with the Dodgers. That's what bothers me. And I'm going to keep saying that. Like, if Sasaki wanted to sign with the Dodgers, if his full intention was signing with the Dodgers, then just sign with the Dodgers. Because the Dodgers are going to offer, other than Steve Cohen, Dodgers are going to offer you the money you want. So that's one thing that bothers me. Also, Teoscar Hernandez bothers me just because he's so good. I mean, he's not as good as, the guys that bat in front of him, but he's a Yankee killer. He's a Yankee killer. Maybe one day he'll end up on the Yankees when he's like 34. But let me know what you guys think though about the Dodgers. How do you feel about them being the new villain in baseball? I think it's good for the sport. I think you got to have that. So Before we go to break, though, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we'll talk about Najee Harris, opening up about him leaving the Steelers, joining the Chargers. We'll get into all that when we return from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're now going to talk about Najee Harris. Talking about the Steelers, he recently joined the Chargers. He will be their lead back as of right now, going into the 2025 season. But I wanted to get into what he said about the Steelers, about his time in Pittsburgh. So this is what he said. It was just a team where we lost Ben Roethlisberger. We lost the O-line. We just didn't know anything on offense, really. We didn't have an identity. We had a young guy coming in at quarterback. I was young. The team was young. I really didn't have nobody to almost learn from on the offensive side. I think the veteran guy on that team was a 2-3 year vet, and he's still learning himself. And I'm coming in, I'm just trying to look for people to pick their brain, and it was just defensive guys. So I go to the defensive guys and talk to them, but they wouldn't be too much. They could tell me about offensive things. So through my years, I've learned a lot that only I learned firsthand. And I feel like in LA, like we've got a lot of veterans that I can learn even more stuff from, even at the quarterback position and the O-line position. So it was an interesting year there. I'll say that. Interesting year. Yeah, but he also just, like I said, they just didn't have an identity. That's the main thing he said. And the Steelers, you know, since Ben Roethlisberger retired, they have really failed to, you know, develop an identity on offense. You know, they've been going through many different starting quarterbacks since Ben retired. You know, they drafted Kenny Pickett. They had Mitchell Trubisky start initially, and then Kenny Pickett came in. And then in 2023, you saw Kenny Pickett start, then he got hurt. Trubisky comes in, he gets benched, they put in Mason Rudolph, and then you had Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. They have failed to figure out the starting quarterback position. And now who knows what's going to happen. They brought back Mason Rudolph, and we're waiting to see on if they bring in Aaron Rodgers, if Rodgers goes there, or what something else happens. Like, do they take a Jackson Dart? Because that's a guy that apparently there could be as much as 4 quarterbacks being taken in the first round. I think you'll see maybe at least 3. I think Jackson Dart is going to find himself being taken in the first round, but I think you'll see him maybe being taken a little bit later. But I know that we're going to see Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward being taken in the first round. But Jackson Dart could be a candidate that gets taken by the Steelers, and he's, you know, if they roll with Mason Rudolph to start the year, he starts, and then you have Dart sit behind him. But, yeah, it's been a problem. What's really kept the Steelers afloat, you know, what's kept them, in their position where they're finishing with a winning record and making the playoffs is coaching, and it's the defense. The offense complements the defense. If you compare the two units, well, you can't really compare offense and defense, but what's the stronger unit? It's their defense. Their offense is able to get by, and, sometimes they'll have good games, but for the most part, it's not an elite offense. Like, you want to talk about an elite offense, you go back to the Ben Roethlisberger. Well, at least my time watching football, it was Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell. That was an elite offense. And that slowly fell apart because of certain reasons. Strong personalities, we'll just say that. It's just they have not been able to find a replacement for Ben, and it's just because, like, hey, we praise Mike Tomlin and the Steelers for always finishing with the winning record, but you know what that does? That has them picking in the 20s, and they're not able to take a top quarterback. And now that's why they're trying to, tape things together. That's why they go out, last offseason, and they bring in Fields, they bring in Russell Wilson, and, they still end up in the same place. You thought things were going to be a little bit different because they got off to a good start. Then they made the switch to Russ, and Russ was playing well. The team was playing well. They were, they looked like they were going to host a playoff game. They looked like they were going to win their division. And then they lost 5 straight games, including the playoff game against the Ravens. And, look, Najee Harris, I think, was, he was decent for the Steelers, but I don't think he really, he didn't elevate that offense. He seemed like he's always been kind of slow. There was a lack of explosive plays with Najee Harris. He was a bruiser. Now, we'll see what happens now when he goes to the Chargers. Maybe they unlock something with him, and he looks like how he did with Alabama. But yeah, he never really had those explosive plays with the Steelers. But I think with the Chargers, maybe change the scenery. Maybe he does better. I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't disagree with what he was saying there. I do think you could also say that it's just a player that, is maybe a little bit bitter about, not being brought back. But I think there definitely is validity to what he's saying. And, it's just been a problem for the Steelers for a long time. Now, you got George Pickens that has a lot of talent. They just traded for DK Metcalf, although it's possible George Pickens could end up getting traded. That's still on the table. But we'll see. But we've talked about the Steelers plenty of times. They lack elite level talent on that side of the ball. And you know what? They do have a lot of young players on this team. Who is a leader on the offensive side of the ball? Now, you could say, like, Russ tried to take over the leadership role. But before Russ got there, you got Kenny Pickett, started, towards the end of 22 and in 2023. George Pickens is young. Pat Fryermuth's a young player. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, you got this young offensive line. There's no more Pouncey. There's no more DeCastro. There's no more Villanueva. There's no more Heath Miller. There's no more Ben Roethlisberger. All these veteran guys that we saw prior to this new era, they're all gone. So, it's up to the young guys to trying to figure it out on their own. But, it's also, you also could say it's not just the players, but also, like, the coaching on the offensive side of the ball. Matt Canada, Steeler fans were jumping for joy when they let him go. Because the Steelers are not accustomed to being a team that, lets go of a coach or a coordinator mid-season. And they did that. Now you bring in Arthur Smith, and not everybody's too thrilled with him. And, Russ wasn't too thrilled with him because apparently their relationship was sour towards the end of the year. And now that also is kind of one of the reasons why Russ might not be coming back to Pittsburgh, along with, them trying to get Aaron Rodgers. But, that's just how it's been as of late. So I do think, like I said, there's validity. But you could also say it's just, again, a player that is just, a little bit sour on leaving and going to another team. And how many times does that happen when you have a player leave and go to another team, and then he, kind of talks bad about the team that he previously played for. Happens all the time. Happens in every sport. But it is a problem, and the Steelers got to figure it out. There's a lot of Steelers fans that would rather the team just tank for a year, get the right quarterback, and then, come back to the following season. Which, look, I mean, as a Giant fan, you have a different perspective on things because the team has been so poor for so long that you'd be fine with just being mediocre and being able to make the playoffs every year. Because that's what the Steelers do, for the most part. Make the playoffs every year, finish with around a winning record. They play competitive football. If you're a New York football fan, you have not seen that, unless you want to count the Bills. I mean, the Bills technically are really the only team that plays in New York, except they're, way upstate New York. The other two teams, they share a stadium. They play in New Jersey. So, yeah, I mean, that's, in that respect, I'd want to be that kind of team. But I get it, though. Because you know what? Steeler fans, they have similar expectations to, the team behind me that you see on the wall. It's all about championships. And the Steelers have not won a playoff game since 2016. It's a long time. And I have said it many times doing these shows. I was in high school the last time they won a playoff game. And it's got to change. And who knows when it's going to change. I don't think it's changing next year if you have Mason Rudolph playing quarterback for you. If he's starting at quarterback day one. It's not happening. But like I said, Steelers fans would be okay with that. If they end up being bad and you draft the right quarterback, depending on it also depends on what they do in this upcoming draft, because they could also take a quarterback in the late first round with their first pick. But we'll see. But let me know what you guys think, though, about what Najee Harris had to say. Do you agree with his statement? I think you do. I agree that the offense lacks identity. So, we'll see what happens. With the draft coming up, what the Steelers decide to do. What are they going to do? Are they going to bring in Aaron Rodgers? Is Rodgers going to make his decision yet? It seems like we're still playing the waiting game on that. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about believe it or not, the 5-year anniversary of Tom Brady leaving the Patriots to join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We will get into that when we return from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are now going to talk about Tom Brady joining the Buccaneers, the 5-year anniversary of that move. First of all, I can't believe it's been 5 years, but here we are. And yeah, this was a big deal. It was actually such a big deal that I wanted to bring up something that my friends did. And they came very close to being Bucs fans for the duration of the time that that Tom Brady was a Buccaneer. So I forget where. I think they were at like a Buffalo Wild Wings, and they put together this contract that they all signed. And it said that if Tom Brady joined the Buccaneers, now this again before he signed with the Bucs, if Tom Brady went there, if Antonio Brown went there, and if they drafted J.K. Dobbins, so they ended up being if all of that happened, they would have been Buccaneers fans the entire time he was with the Buccaneers. So they were a J.K. Dobbins away from abandoning their Giants and Jets fandoms and joining the Buccaneers. Could you and they tweeted about it, and actually Buffalo Wild Wings responded to their tweet because my friend tweeted out the contract. I'm surprised it didn't blow up the way it did. It didn't or it didn't really blow up that much. Thought it would get more traction, but I guess not. So yeah, they ended up not being Buccaneers fans because J.K. Dobbins ended up getting drafted by the Ravens. But this was a big deal. I mean, Tom Brady was one of those guys that you just thought was going to stay in the same uniform forever. When you look back at Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, those guys that ended up switching teams, you thought they were going to stay with the same team forever. And it just didn't happen. For different circumstances, of course, for each. But, it's 2019. Patriots get knocked out by the Titans in the first round. And it seemed like things were not on the best of terms between Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Obviously, things have changed now. Everything's water under the bridge. But Tom Brady was leaving New England. And where was he going to end up going? And you started hearing the Buccaneers. And it turns out that team just needed him to be the quarterback. They replaced Jameis Winston with him after Jameis Winston had that 30-30 season. And it also came during a time where, we mentioned the, microphone falling. It's happened a lot this week. But it came during a time where the world was shut down, essentially. So it was that whole year was just very strange. I hope something like that never happens again, but it was just very strange just having no fans. I mean, the hype around it was incredible because you're like, wow, we're going to have Tom Brady and Drew Brees in the same division. He's coming over to the NFC. How is this going to work out? And, he brings over Gronkowski. Gronkowski, comes out of retirement to play. They brought Antonio Brown in. They brought in Leonard Fournette. And I just remember that first game, the overreactions. Everyone's like, yep, he's made the wrong decision by signing with the Buccaneers. Should have just retired. And, it did take some time for the Buccaneers to kind of get going. I think it was when after their bye week, they really started to round into form. And, once we got to the playoffs, you kind of had that feeling that this team is going to make a run, isn't it? And look at what they did. Now, I think the bigger reason why Tampa got to the Super Bowl and won it is because of their defense. But Brady played well in the postseason. And he was able to go and be part of a team that knocked off Drew Brees, knocked off Aaron Rodgers, who won the MVP, and then he knocked off Patrick Mahomes, who was trying to go for his second Super Bowl and try to win back-to-back before they eventually did it. It really was an unbelievable time. And then he followed it up with another great year in 2021 where you could make the argument he should have won the MVP over Aaron Rodgers. And I talked about it the other day. The playoff game against the Rams was airing the other day on NFL Network, and that was a great game. That was a great weekend of football. Definitely looking back, would have liked to have seen Rodgers and Brady go at it in the championship game again. I would have wanted to see that. But instead, got Stafford against the 49ers. But I was happy that the Rams won that year. I was happy Stafford won that year. But then Brady announced his retirement. And he thought that was it. And honestly, probably better off he would have retired after the 2021 season. But then he came back for another year, and the Bucs weren't as good. Not all his fault, but, Gronk went back into retirement. The offensive line wasn't very good. Bruce Arians now, was not on the sidelines. Todd Bowles took over as the head coach, and the team went 8-9. And then he ended up losing to the Cowboys in the playoffs. So, yeah, I would have rather him just have gone out against the Rams, losing, coming back, and then, it took 2 throws by Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp to beat the Bucs. And the Bucs had a ton of injuries in 2021. They're missing a lot of guys. If they had their whole team, I mean, if Antonio Brown didn't walk off the field against the Jets, if Chris Godwin didn't, I think Chris Godwin tore his ACL that year. If they had their guys, their full complement of weapons, I mean, you can make the argument they could have repeated. But whatever. That time, that 3-year span in Tampa, that was really special. I mean, Buccaneers fans, I mean, they look at Tom Brady as an icon in Tampa forever for coming over and changing everything. It was a big deal. It was a big deal, and there's always, you're always going to see, people like when quarterbacks change teams now, that's all they're going to look at. Because, before that, it was Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl with the Broncos. He went to 2 Super Bowls with the Broncos. Now, the second Super Bowl, that really was on the backs of the defense. But the first time they made it, Peyton Manning had the record-setting year, 55 touchdown passes, and then, the year after Brady won the Super Bowl with Tampa, you had Stafford getting traded over from the Lions to the Rams. And then, and he won a Super Bowl, and then Aaron Rodgers got traded to the Jets. And didn't really pan out. But I also wanted to bring this up. So, yes, Aaron Rodgers is going to be taking longer, but last week you had Adam Schefter say I think it was on the McAfee show, right? Make your decision already. Was the media back in the day, pressuring, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady the same way to make their decision on whether they're going to sign or whether they're going to retire or not? And the same thing with Drew Brees. I don't understand why everyone is so. It has to do with it being impatient. That's definitely a huge thing. But were they doing the same thing to these guys to make a decision too? I don't think so. And look, that's me, kind of coming to the defense of Aaron Rodgers a little bit. But Tom Brady's making the decision. Were people saying make your decision already? I guess because you want to see what he does, but I don't think it was to the extent of what's happening with Aaron Rodgers. But now Aaron Rodgers is, taking longer. Because Brady signed his contract, Peyton signed his contract, Drew Brees made his decision on his retirement all around this time. So, and Rodgers could be making a decision after the draft. But it's a tough decision for these players. Everybody's different. Everybody's got different timelines. So, but I wanted to bring that up. But yeah, it was an interesting time with Tom Brady in Tampa. Because I'm so used to him just playing in New England. I never really thought about him leaving. And then when it happened, you're like, wow. And it was a special couple of years. The last year wasn't great, but the first 2, you won a Super Bowl. You put up an MVP. You put up MVP numbers the following season. Got to the divisional round. He could have kept playing. He could have. But hey, now he's got a lot of stuff going on. He's now he's an owner. He's an analyst. So he's got plenty of things going on. But yeah, I don't know. Just figured I'd bring it up. 5 years. It's it's kind of a big deal, I guess. Also with the offseason in the NFL kind of being slow, I wanted to revisit this and talk about it. So, but let me know what you guys think though about Tom Brady when he joined the Bucs. What was your favorite moment from that time? Could it be from when, if you're a Cowboys fan, knocking him off in his last game? If you're a Rams fan, if you're a Buccaneers fan and him taking you to the Super Bowl and winning it against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I'll tell you, when we finally got to see Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady match up against each other in the playoffs, I had a feeling that it was not going to go Rodgers' way. I just had a feeling that you just kind of, the writing, in my opinion, was kind of on the wall that it was going to be the Bucs that were going to come out on top. And when Tom Brady hit Scotty Miller basically on that Hail Mary to end the first half, the game was over. I almost went to bed. I almost said, you know what, I'm not watching this. I was in my my dorm room watching that game, and I really was just contemplating not watching the second half. But yeah, that happened. It is what it is. So yeah, no, I just thought we would revisit this because of the 5-year anniversary of this happening. So yeah, let me know what you guys think though about your favorite Tom Brady Buccaneer moment. How about when he was, after they won the Super Bowl and they were at the parade and he throws the Lombardi Trophy to Gronk when they're all on the boats. Thankfully Gronk caught that. Otherwise, the Lombardi Trophy would have been, they would have had to get a dive team there to get it out. But yeah, so we're going to take our final break of the show now. And then when we come back, we will talk about the Bills. We will take a look at their season and talk about what they've done in the offseason so far as well. So for one final time today, make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are now going to get into the season overview, season recap of the Buffalo Bills, and then we'll take a look at what they've done in the offseason so far, what they could potentially address during the draft. So going into the year, I had the Bills making the playoffs. I had them as a wild card team because, to bring up, once again, thankfully, this will probably be the last time I ever bring this up, but I had the Jets winning the AFC East. And I started drinking the Kool-Aid on the Bills not making the playoffs early on in the offseason because, they let go of so many guys. But then I kind of came back a little bit and said, you know what, I can't not have them in the playoffs. So I had them winning 10 games, making the playoffs. Now, not only did they win more than 10 games, they won the division, and they also had Josh Allen, who won MVP. They ended up going 13-4. They got the 2 seed, and they got off to a roaring start. they started off the year 3-0. They had a comeback win against the Cardinals. Josh Allen had 4 touchdowns in the game, 2 passing, 2 rushing. They won 34-28, comeback win. Then you had the defense pick off 2 or 3 times. Allen didn't have a monster game, but they ended up winning that one 31-10. And then they were all over Jacksonville, 47-10. Josh Allen, 4 touchdowns in the game, was their leading rusher. But then they went to they slid a little bit, because then they went up against the Ravens and the Texans. They lost both of those games. They got destroyed by the Ravens, 35-10. Derrick Henry had almost 200 yards rushing in the game. I had that big run early on in the game. Josh Allen was not great. The Bills really, as a whole, were not great in that game. And then the Texans, they lost a relatively close game, 23-20. I think it was a game-winning field goal. Yeah, Kymie Fairbairn, a 59-yarder to win the game. So the Bills dropped a couple games, and you thought, oh, that's not good. But then they proceeded to win 6 straight games going into the bye. They beat the Jets on Monday night. The Jets kind of beat themselves in that game, but they won that. They beat up on the Titans. They beat up on the Seahawks in Seattle. They won on a late field goal by Tyler Bass against the Dolphins. They beat the Colts 30-20. And then this was the game of the year at this point, and that was the Chiefs and the Bills. Chiefs visiting the Bills. This is the first time that Patrick Mahomes is playing Josh Allen in the regular season with fans in Buffalo. And the Bills got the better of them because Josh Allen had that signature play on the 4th and 2 that put them up 29-21. They kicked the extra point. So, they put them up by 2 scores. And the Bills were able to win that game. And you thought, okay, could this be the Bills' year? So then they went into the bye week. They come out of the bye week, and they play that snow game against the 49ers, where Josh Allen not only throws a touchdown, but he has a receiving touchdown on the same play. And that's why I ended up getting eliminated from my fantasy playoffs in one of my leagues. But then you also had the Bills as a team run for over 200 yards against the Niners. And, so that got them to 10-2 at that point. Then they got upset by the Rams. That was a very high-scoring game, 44-42 the final score. Josh Allen had 6 total touchdowns in the game. He had 342 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no picks, had 3 rushing touchdowns. Khalil Shakir, 5 receptions for 106 yards and a touchdown. But yeah, they ended up losing that, so their winning streak got snapped. But then they played the Lions the following week, and they won that game. Josh Allen, 4 touchdowns in the game, 2 rushing, 2 passing. He almost had another touchdown pass where it was like, a jump shot, but there was a penalty on the play, and they called it back. But yeah, Bills ran the ball for almost 200 yards in that game, so they knocked off the Lions. They came back against the Patriots. They were down early in that. They won. And then they beat up on the Jets, 40-14. And then they played their. Josh Allen came in, played like the first. I think he played like the first snap, but then they took him out. Patriots ended up winning against their backups. Then you had the playoff game against the Broncos, and the Broncos got off to a fast start. Bo Nix throws that touchdown to Troy Franklin. And you're like, oh wow, this is going to be a tough game for the Bills. And then the Bills scored 31 unanswered points. And then you had a very entertaining game between them and the Ravens. Ravens kind of beat themselves with the turnovers. Mark Andrews drops the 2-point conversion. Bills end up winning that game. And then they advance against the Chiefs in the championship game. And they came up short. A lot of people talk about the first down call. Thankfully, that hopefully won't be a problem anymore. But, Josh Allen played well in the game. And, he had a chance at the end when he threw that, heaved up that pass that Kincaid couldn't come down with. It's just the Chiefs own them in the postseason. And that will change at some point, I would imagine. But for now, it has not. So the Bills went 13-4. They went to the championship game. They ended up losing, coming up short there. Josh Allen wins his first ever MVP. He had 28 touchdowns and 6 picks. He had 12 rushing touchdowns on the year, passed for 3,700 yards. James Cook had 16 rushing touchdowns, had over 1,000 yards. So that was his best season. Their leading receiver was Khalil Shakir. He had 821 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. Keon Coleman had 556 and 4 touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid had a couple of touchdowns. Matt Collins was the leading touchdown recipient. He had 5 on the season. He's now no longer there. He left and went to New England. They did acquire Amari Cooper at the trade deadline. Didn't really do much in his time there. The Bills, I think, in this upcoming season, they're hoping they get more contributions out of their receivers. You're hoping Keon Coleman takes that next step. They paid Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir was their best receiver. But yeah, you're hoping that some of the other guys step up there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the defense was, it was probably an average defense. The leading sack player was, or their sack leader was Greg Rousseau. He had 8 sacks. They paid him this offseason. Epinesa had 6 sacks on the year. Von Miller had 6. Now Von Miller is no longer there. And they had a handful of players that had 2 interceptions on the year. And then this offseason, they signed Joshua Palmer. They added him to the receiving corps. They signed Dane Jackson, a corner. Signed a couple of safeties. They signed some defensive linemen. They signed Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt from the Rams. Both of those guys are actually going to be suspended for the first 6 games. But they did bring in Joey Bosa, so he's going to be the Von Miller replacement. If Bosa could stay healthy, that could be a good player on the defensive line. But they've made some moves. And let's see what they do in the draft. Maybe they go offense. Maybe they draft a receiver. I don't know. I think maybe you could see them go defense in this upcoming draft. But we'll see. Not a lot of splashy moves that they've made this offseason. I mean, I guess you could throw Joey Bosa in there on a 1-year deal. But this was a year that the Bills were looked at as a team that, wasn't really in the conversation of being in contention, and they made it all the way to the championship game. And a lot of credit has to go to Josh Allen and what he was able to do. He carried that team. And, he's one of those guys where if you take him off the Bills are not a playoff team. They don't even come close to the playoffs without Josh Allen. And, it was one of the debates of the season where you're kind of saying, well, who's going to win MVP? Is it going to be Lamar Jackson? Is it going to be Josh Allen? You can make the argument that it should have been Lamar, but he ended up getting first-team All-Pro. I thought they were that stretch between the Rams and Lions games, I thought that was a stretch where I was like, Josh Allen won the MVP. Because you have 6 touchdowns in one game, and then you have 5 touchdowns in another. And you could also throw in the team record. The Bills had a better record than the Ravens, and Josh Allen was doing it with less. So, but I if Lamar won it, I wouldn't have had a problem with it. But you kind of got the sense that Josh Allen was going to get the MVP, and rightfully so. He deserves it. Now it's about getting that Super Bowl ring at some point. We saw Jalen Hurts finally break through in this Mahomes era and win one. Now let's see who's the next guy to do it. Could it be Josh Allen? A strong possibility of that happening, but just as long as they don't run into the Chiefs, because it seems like every AFC team has had a problem with the Chiefs as of late. But let me know what you guys think, though, about the Bills. What are some of your early expectations going into next year? Who do you think that they are going to target in this upcoming draft? Let me know in the comments. But that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well on the network. I hope that, for the most part, your bracket is still intact. Mine is. Had a couple of Sweet 16 teams go down, like I said, with Clemson and Missouri as well. But hopefully, Duke doesn't lose today. Do not need to see them lose because I have them winning the whole thing in the majority of my brackets. Just as long as my Final Four team survives, as we move along here in the tournament. But We do have baseball coming up next week. Baseball is starting next week, so there will be some predictions. Going to take a look at some of these teams this weekend to get more familiar with the rosters. Because obviously I am not, all over every single team, but we'll make our predictions. Maybe a World Series prediction, and opening day. I know we just had it, but now everybody else starts next Thursday, so less than a week away. So I can't wait for that. And we'll see what happens this weekend with March Madness. Should be fun. And so until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna